Welcome to Truth Matters UK. Today I wanted to give you a bit of hope. I wanted to show where the truth actually ended a conflict that had been going on for 30 years. We're told every day that we live in a divided country, that we're trapped in a culture war that can never be won. We see it on our news feeds, we hear it from our politicians, and we read it in our papers. But what if I told you that most of that division is an illusion? Today, I want to take you back to Ireland in 2016, a country that was, by all accounts, broken by a 30-year deadlock over one of the most sensitive issues imaginable. The media said it was impossible to solve, the politicians were terrified to touch it. But then they did something radical. They stopped listening to the pundits and the lobbyists, and they started listening to the truth. This is a story of a miracle in democracy, and it proves the three pillars of reform are calling for. They're not just ideas, they're the only way to save our democracy, and this is it in action. So to understand the war that followed, you have to understand the law that started it. So since 1983, the Irish Constitution contained the Eighth Amendment. It was a unique piece of law that gave a pregnant woman and an unborn fetus an equal right to life. For 30 years, this created a legal and moral stalemate that doctors and politicians were terrified to touch. But sadly, in 2012, that stalemate ended in a tragedy. This is on the right side of the screen, there's a medical analysis from the National Library of Medicine. It examines the death of Savita, a woman who died in an Irish hospital after being refused a life-saving abortion during a miscarriage because a fetal heartbeat was still present. Her death was a spark. The country was suddenly forced to look at the law that many now felt was no longer fit for purpose. But instead of the calm, measured, evidence-based discussion seen in this medical journal, the media noise machine saw an opportunity to turn a national tragedy into a profitable battlefield. Now, when medical experts were looking at the tragic reality of hospital policies, the media saw an opportunity of a different kind. They didn't want a quiet analysis, they wanted a noise machine. Between 2013 and 2016, there were over 5,300 stories about this one issue alone. That is a relentless, daily drumbeat of noise. On average, you are talking 3.5 articles every single day in the papers for 3 years. And just look at how they reported it. They didn't just say people disagreed. They used war or tribal type language to keep you hooked. They called elected officials rebels. They framed a medical debate as a last cultural war. They even highlighted threats of excommunication to make the stakes feel like life or death. Was it accurate? It was a version of the truth, but it was the version of the truth that sold papers. There was certainly some amplification of people on the extreme ends of the scale. Conflict is profitable. Peace and consensus, they don't drive clicks. Abortion wars do. The media spent years fueling a fire, and it certainly didn't, hurt their business. In the process, they convinced the nation that we were too broken to ever agree. They turned a disagreement into a deadlock, because a deadlock is a headline that never ends. So, how did they break a deadlock that had generated 5,000 headlines but zero solutions? They stopped the war by taking it out of the hands of the people who were profiting from the conflict. The government did something fairly radical, really, and they did something that the media mocked. They handed the decision over to 99 ordinary strangers. These weren't rebels or political insiders. They were a representative sample of the whole country. So teachers, bus drivers, retirees, young parents, kind of pro-life, pro-abortion, everything in between. And for 18 months, these strangers would get together in a room. They would be taken away from the noise so that couldn't reach them. And this is pillar two, the political honesty. Instead of being fed 30-second sound bites designed to make them angry, they were given hours of testimony from medical experts and people with real life experiences. They weren't there to win an argument for a newspaper. They were there to find the truth for their country. The media told us these people were too divided to ever agree. But when you remove the profit motive and you replace it with evidence, and you actually listen to both sides of the argument, the impossible then becomes the inevitable. So after 18 months of looking at the facts, it was time for the 99 strangers to vote. And the results didn't just surprise the pundits, they dismantled the entire war narrative. First, 87% of the assembly, so nearly 9 out of 10 people, agreed that the status quo was broken and the law had to change. The 50-50 split the newspapers spent years reporting on simply didn't exist in that room. But they didn't stop there. When it came to the finer details, over 67% reached a consensus on the exact model of reform. Think about that power of that. When you remove the media's profit motive and the politicians' fear, you don't get a cultural war. You get a supermajority of ordinary citizens who, despite their different backgrounds, are capable of agreeing on the most complex and sensitive issues in our society. This is the truth the headlines try to hide. We are nowhere near as divided as they want us to believe. So when the 99 Strangers finished their work, the media actually went on the attack again. An Irish Times poll in 2017 found that only 23% of the public agreed with the Assembly's plan for reform. The papers were blunt. They said the Assembly did not chime with the public. They claimed 99 Strangers had been swayed by intense stimuli and were no longer representative of the real Ireland. The media was essentially saying the 99 Strangers are wrong because they know too much. The public is right because they haven't seen the evidence yet. But look what happened just 1 year later. Once the entire nation went through the same process, once we all stopped shouting and started looking at the same expert testimony and the medical facts, the public did exactly what the 99 Strangers did. The poll said 23%. The final vote on the referendum was a landslide 66.4%. The people weren't conflicted as the papers claimed. They were just waiting for the truth. This proves that the division in our society isn't a permanent state, it's a symptom of a broken information system. Ireland's story isn't just about one law. It's a blueprint. It's the potential for the future and how we can fix our own broken conversations here in the UK. The media told us that consensus was impossible. They sold over 5,300 headlines of conflict because it was good for business. They told us we're a nation, 23% nation, divided, angry and stuck. But 99 Strangers proved them wrong. They proved them that when you remove the profit motive of the noise machine and replace it with political honesty, the people don't just find a solution, they find a super majority. At Truth Matters, this is our mission. We believe you deserve better than manufactured tribal warfare. We believe in media accountability, where news informs us instead of inflaming us. We believe in political honesty, where evidence comes before ideology. And we believe in education reform, where we have smart, informed citizens. The noise wants you to believe we are too broken to ever agree. Ireland proved we aren't. It's time we demanded the same honesty here, because when the truth matters, everything changes. Thank you for your time.